Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for our October the 6th council meeting. We will call the meeting to order at 9:30 a.m. this morning. We will move down to item B, adoption of the agenda, additions or deletions to the agenda. I have two additions I'd like to propose. I'd like to add a personnel matter as item F2 to the closed session in accordance with Section 17 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, disclosure harmful to personnel privacy. And I would also like to add a second item, a discussion on rural crime. I believe multiple members of council have received communication over the last few days here. Just like to have that conversation in the public part of our meeting. I would propose that we add that as new business item I1. Are there any other additions or deletions? Seeing none. Mark?
I'd move the adoption of the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Mark. Mark has moved for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving down, C, number 1, County Council meeting minutes. Council meeting minutes of the September 15th, 2022 council meeting. Are there any errors, omissions, or any other issues you've seen with the minutes? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we adopt the County Council minutes from September 15th, 2022 as presented.
Thank you, John. John has moved the County Council meeting minutes of the September 15th, 2022 meeting as presented. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we can move down to our subdivision applications. I will call our Supervisor of Planning and Development, Hilary Jansen, forward, and we can start on item D1, Subdivision Application 2022-0-131, Marshall Gibson, lots 7 and 8, Block 1, Plan 8183EA, within the northwest quarter of 301021-west of the 4th. Oh, and morning, Steve. How are you today?
Morning, Council. So this first subdivision application that we have today is located in the hamlet of Shaughnessy on just off of Becker Street and First Street. They wish to subdivide this parcel into two separate parcels. Both would be facing, I guess, one would be facing off Becker, the other one would be gaining access off of First Street. The parcel does meet the minimum parcel size as allowed in the Hamlet residential district, in that it's more than 5,000 square feet in size, and it meets the size requirements in terms of frontage also. So it does meet all of the county subdivision criteria for Hamlet residential, and with that I will turn it over to Steve Hardy for the planning comments and the recommendation.
Good morning. As Mr. Chair, this application, as explained, is to split an existing title, a parcel, in half along the original Hamlet plan lot line and create two separate titles. As you can see by the description, the title currently is lots 7 and 8. So it's part of the original plan that created the individual lots 7 and 8. At some point they were tied together to create one title, one parcel. So the application is to split along that original lot line there between lots 7 and 8 on the original subdivision plan. So you can maybe see from the air photo on the screen that on the GIS that the west lot contains an existing dwelling and a rear yard shed. There's a lane at the north side of the property, while the east lot that they want to create there is a vacant lot. They want to subdivide that in order to have the potential to put a new residential yard on that east title. In looking at this application, there's no encroachments present with the existing situation or the existing yard. The existing west lot has access from the west from Becker Street, and the vacant east lot will be able to have access to the south onto First Street. This subdivision is possible with the provision of municipal water and sewer in the hamlet of Shaughnessy, and the applicant will be responsible for any costs associated with connecting to the county's hamlet infrastructure. Just some of the larger processing notes that this lot is situated outside the 300-meter buffer to the Hamlet sewage lagoons north of the hamlet. This lot, along with most of Shaughnessy, is in an area identified by the province as potentially containing a historic resource. So as under the legislation, we're required to send it to the province for that. As of today, we haven't heard back yet from Historical Resources, but typically with all the subdivisions within the hamlet boundaries, because it's existing development and infrastructure there, they usually don't require anything under the Historical Resources. But the applicant would be responsible for meeting something if they came back and did request something, but it's typically not the experience or within the hamlet itself. So, as mentioned, this application does meet the requirements of the land use bylaw for the Hamlet Residential Land Use District and the appropriate lot sizing with municipal servicing available. So with that, it complying with the bylaw, there's no objections or concerns received from any of the referral agencies or any of the neighbors. I have recommended an approval to you based on the conditions outlined in the draft resolution in front of you. And those would be that any outstanding taxes are paid and up to date, that a development agreement be entered into with the county, so that would address the servicing and the connections to the water and sewer infrastructure. We need a final plan of survey, that any requirements of the Administrator of Alberta Culture, Multicultures, and Status of Women, who looks after the historical resources, if they have any requirements or conditions, that those be met, and that any easements shall be established. Up until today, there was no requests for easements from any of the utility companies.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Hillary. Any questions from council? Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, is there any buildings on that right now? Nothing yet?
No, through the chair, there's no current buildings on the area that they wish to subdivide and develop on, just some trees.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure whether you said that or not, but approving the subdivision, would the existing structures meet the setback requirements?
Yes.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's move that subdivision application 2022-0131 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2022-0-131 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Hillary. We can move down then to item number D2, application 2022-0-135, Groenenboom Farms Limited, north half of the 35-9-23 west of the 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This second application, subdivision application for today, as mentioned, is for Groenenboom Farms. They wish to be able to subdivide out an existing yard out of the northwest 35-9-23 west of the 4th. As you'll note on the screen and in your package, that there already has been a subdivision out of that particular quarter section to accommodate a different residence. So in order for them to allow for this particular residence to come out, they've agreed to consolidate some smaller titles together that were created historically, so that we're starting with essentially 3 titles and ending with 2. So we're not increasing the number of titles that would be allowed within the quarter section, thus, or within the 2 quarters, thus it would meet the county subdivision criteria. So they wish to subdivide out a 3.41 acre yard for country residential use and then consolidate the remaining agricultural titles together to create an agricultural title that would be 309 acres plus or minus. And that's how we get to from the 3 to the 2 parcels. And with that, I will throw it off to Steve for the rest of the planning comments and the recommendation.
Yeah, this application that is in front of you, it's involving a subdivision and consolidation of land. The proposed smaller parcel yard out of the northwest of 35 is for an existing established yard that contains a dwelling and various other buildings and a treed yard area. The residence is serviced by the rural water co-op, and there's a private on-site septic field that in accordance with the parcel boundary they're proposing, it would be still within the confines of the property once subdivided. You see that access is off of the service road on the north side there, adjacent to Highway 3. So these applicants, besides having the northwest quarter agricultural land, they also have 2 titles in the northeast of 35 adjacent to them. So the part of the proposal is that the northwest remnant agricultural land will be consolidated to the northeast quarter section, which they contain 2 titles there. The non-ag coulee agricultural lands are irrigated, and you can see from the photo there between the 2 quarter sections in the green there with the pivots, the irrigation on there. And once consolidated, they will be farmed as one cohesive agricultural unit. The existing 47.47 acre title in the northeast, 35.923, was created as a title lying south of the center line of the old historic McLeod to Lethbridge Trail, as shown on the original 1897 township plan that was registered. So that's how long that title's been there. So most of the land in this area is identified as potentially containing a historic resource, a category 5A, archaeological and historical, while the portion of the northwest potentially contains a category 4. However, in this application, we did get a response back from Alberta Culture, Multicultural and Status of Women, and because of the consolidation of the land and amalgamating into a larger title, they won't require a historical resource approval from the applicants and to go through that process. As well as part of this application, there is an abandoned gas well located within the middle of the northwest quarter section, but it doesn't impact the yard subdivision or the consolidation of the agricultural land. As well, you can see that there is a confined feeding operation located by the family to the very southeast. It's mostly in the southeast of 35 with a permit for 17,500 head of beef. But for the yard portion involved in this reconfiguration and consolidation, it's outside the minimum distance separation that would be required. Additionally, the residence was established prior to the MDS regulation coming into effect regardless. So this application is for a reconfiguration of titles. It's a reduction in the amount of titles in the north half of 35.923. So the applicants involved in this currently have the 3 titles, and in the end with the consolidation, they'll have 2 titles. All that land will be tied together, amalgamated by a plan of survey by an Alberta land surveyor, so that it can't be re-subdivided without them coming back here to you and asking permission, and you're given the permission to do so in a sense. So it'd be all one cohesive title there for the larger agricultural land. With this application, there was no, during the referral process, objections or concerns received on it. Alberta Transportation has no concerns and gave a waiver because they're taking access off the service road there, not directly to the highway. This is a subdivision that you can consider under your reconfiguration, realignments of titles policies under the subdivision criteria. And at the time of today as well, we've now heard back from most of the utility companies, and other than one, I think, and so far no easements are required or needed by any of the utility agencies. So with that, this is an application that's where you have to look at the merit of the proposal, and if it makes sense to you, there's a policy that allows for it. On the basis of the amalgamation and them going from 3 down to 2 titles, the draft resolution in front of you is for a recommendation of approval. That would involve the payment of municipal reserve on the 3.41 acre parcel at the value of $7,000 per acre. And the other conditions would be payment of outstanding property taxes, a development agreement entered into with the county if required. The third condition, which would be the important one, is that the land is consolidated together by plan of survey from a Alberta land surveyor, so it can't be re-subdivided. And then the fourth was just the blanket easement condition, as when we sent the information out for your agenda package, we hadn't heard back yet from all the utility agencies.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Hillary. Any questions from council? Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to satisfy my curiosity, you said there's 3 titles, and you're going to 2, but what about the house that's on the southwest of the northwest there? Is that already on a separate title?
The house, which house?
Right here.
This is an office right here.
Right
Oh,
here.
yeah, that's the one
Yeah.
that we were, through the chair, through Councillor Hickey. Yes, this house has been subdivided out already.
So technically, there's 4 titles there now, right? Because it was part of the northwest, right?
Yes, so there was, there is technically 4 titles on there right now. The residence was subdivided off about 5 years ago. And so we're dealing with the remainder 3 titles.
So then is that white line in the northeast of 35? Is that no,
No, this one.
the other side, right there? What's that white line for? Is
That's-
that
That's the
anything?
parcel line. Yeah, that's how the parcel line is. This parcel down here is at 47 acres. So that's the 3rd parcel that
Okay.
we're referring to.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you look in your agenda package, when
Page
it,
30,
page 30,
31, or I think that's the page number.
it has identifier labels on there showing the different titles. So that white line, there's the 2 titles in the northeast of 35, and that white line separates the 2 titles within there, the north half and then the southern portion. And that's the line that used to follow the old McLeod-Lethbridge Trail. That's where it was separated from, which that historic trail has disappeared now, but that's how that was created.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the whole process of going through this exercise of amalgamating all these parcels is because they previously subdivided off that area that's on the right-hand side or left-hand side of the screen then?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
I had John and Eric.
I was just going to move that.
If you have a question,
yeah.
Eric, go ahead, yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have to question their motives, but to leave a center line in between the quarters would essentially, in my mind, make more sense. That way you keep your quarters separated, and for any sales changes down the road. So it seems like we're removing a half section line in order to allow an extra subdivision. Is that a fair conclusion of what's going on?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Van Essen. So because there's already been that subdivision out of the northwest, in order for them to do and to reconfigure the amalgamation of the titles is how they can resolve the subdivision, so that they're on the north portion of 35,923. They're only have the maximum number of titles that they would be allowed for that particular area. Groenenboom Farms, with regards to their land base, they don't seem to be selling any land.
Not at all.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just
Yeah.
further to that, the applicants voluntarily offered to do that, or they're willing to do that, because it's part of their own personal arrangements too. Mrs. Groenenboom's husband died, it was last year, earlier in the year. She lives in that house, and the rest of all the land is currently owned by Groenenboom Farms, the corporation, so to speak, and they're looking to separate and have that house as part of the estate settlement, and the rest is taken over by Groenenboom Farms. So they don't have a problem or issue with it all being tied together, because it's all farmed and used for them as Groenenboom, as the corporation for Groenenboom Farms. So they willingly are doing that because that's all part of their operations or whatever. So.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given all of that information, I'd like to move that the subdivision application 2022-0-135 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
Thank you, John. John has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2022-0-135 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. Any further discussion? Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the little house the yard you're subdividing now would be part of the estate settlement? Is that what I get? Or is it the other one that was already out?
No, it's the one that we're subdividing today.
So, in the past, it has been kind of quite an issue to use something like this to settle an estate. I guess as long as they're quite comfortable with it, it somewhat makes sense, but
It's as they've proposed. We didn't propose this for them.
okay.
Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, is that even an issue for the county, that is stated? Probably not, right? That is just an agreement they have with themselves, and we should probably not even be mentioning that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through the Councilor Vanderveen, that's correct. I was just to give you some background on it, just to explain that they offered or willing to do it. It helps out their situation, but from the county and the municipality's perspective, we're just looking at the subdivision policies. If you have a policy that allows for this and how it can be done, and that is through your reconfiguration, realignment of policies, where in the end, you create the same number or less titles than you originally started with, and in this case, they'll have less titles than what they started with as part of the proposal. And all the parcel sizes comply with the bylaw.
Thank you, Steve. Once again, John has moved the recommendation that subdivision application 2022-0135 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution. I'll ask again, any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
We have about 6 minutes until 10 o'clock. Just for clarity, we do have 2 public hearings this morning, scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. We also have a 10:30 delegation as well as an 11:30 delegation today. So, with that, how should we proceed? Hillary?
So I could recommend that we could do the road closure at this time. It's just first reading, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. Why don't we move then down to department reports, H1, Community Services, H1.1. Is that where you're headed, Hillary?
Yes.
Bylaw 22-015, road closure, sale, and consolidation, first reading. Hillary?
Thank you. I'll just get to the report. There we go. Nope. Too many reports. So this application, as received by the applicant of one of the residential parcels in Diamond City, is to close a portion of a half of a laneway that exists in the north end of Diamond City. So as you can see on the image that I have on the screen, there is it's half of the size of an actual laneway in north of these three titles. The applicants are the Van Manens and the Enses. They wish to close the portion of that laneway that is just to the north of their properties. The county became aware of the situation when a compliance letter was sent in with regards to a residence, and it was found that there was a number of structures within the laneway, and we recommended to them that, one, they could either apply to close the road or they could remove those obstructions from the right-of-way. After discussion with them, it was determined that the road closure would probably be the best way moving forward. In discussion with our public operations department, they had no concerns with closing this portion of laneway, as we had done a similar action further to the east. That same laneway going to the east, we also closed to the benefit of those landowners. There's no infrastructure in this particular laneway that services these lots, so the closure should be fairly clean. No power lines have to be removed or relocated. So with that, county administration did see some merit in closing this laneway, as we would not need it in the future as a laneway, as we do not generally have laneways in, or we try to get away from laneways as much as possible in our hamlets. Just this one is undeveloped and unmaintained. So with that, I have recommended to you to approve first reading of Bylaw 22-015. The first reading will just set the parameters for setting up the public hearing date, and then also send the notices to the adjacent landowners with regards to this particular lane closure. And I'll put it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Any questions from council? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any particular reason why we wouldn't be entertaining closing the entire laneway? Because we're basically just leaving a little section of it there on lot 30, I guess is it lot 30? Lot 3? I'm looking at the diagram
Yes.
here, but the one immediately
Directly
to the east.
Mr. McLeod's parcel. Yes, through the chair to Councillor Kurbis. The reason, with regards to road closure, it's very much applicant driven in terms of how they want to proceed with the road closure. It becomes quite a bit more complicated the more landowners you add to a road closure application, because there's agreements that have to be set. Everybody has to be on the same page with regards to the road closure. I do believe that when the Van Manens looked at this, I do believe they approached Mr. McLeod. He was not interested in closing his portion or purchasing it from the county at this time. He may not have the means to be able to do so. So they chose just to close that western portion. That doesn't preclude Mr. McLeod or any future landowner from coming forward and asking the same question, or asking for the same consideration with regards to the road closure. The reason it's, from our perspective, it's okay to leave it as is because it's not landlocked by any means. It still could provide Mr. McLeod with access to his rear yard, which apparently he does use to some extent. So.
Any further? Klaus?
I'll move that, that we, that bylaw 2022-015 be read for the first time.
Thank you, Klaus. Klaus has moved the recommendation that bylaw 22-015 be read a first time. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Hillary. And with that, it is 9:59, so we could recess our regular meeting. And before us today, we have two public hearings. The first before us is bylaw 22-013 to redesignate plan 0011814 lot 17 in the southwest 61021 west of the 4th from rural urban fringe to grouped country residential. I would ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
Move so.
Morris has moved to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act. As amended, the public hearing is being live streamed via the county's YouTube channel. The public hearing for Bylaw 22-013 is now officially open. I'll now ask that the Supervisor of Planning and Development, Hilary Jansen, review the nature of the hearing and provide an overview of what is being proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council, this application to redesignate Plan 0011-814, Lot 17, located in the southwest 61021 west of the 4th, is from to redesignate it from rural urban fringe to group country residential to allow for the future subdivision of the subject parcel into 2 parcels. The applicant approached county administration asking the merits of doing a subdivision of their parcel. At that time, we discussed that they would have to redesignate their parcel to group country residential. I'm just going to throw on the planning layer so you can kind of see the land use districts in this area. Their neighbors to both the north and to the east have previously rezoned to group country residential to do similar actions as to subdivide their parcels, and so it to redesignate to group country residential was not was in line with the county's group country residential land use policy and also the county's municipal development plan. So they took that approach and are applying to redesignate to group country residential. And as I mentioned, their intent is to subdivide off the vacant 3 acres, 3 northernmost acres of the parcel to allow for that subdivision at some point in the future. The lands, you'll note that their yard is well established in the center of that parcel. The lands to the south would not be subdividable as they are part of the coulee draw system that leads to the Old Man River. The application was circulated to all Lethbridge County departments and external agencies for review. No concerns or objections were received with regards to the proposed bylaw. Alberta Transportation had no concerns, and our internal departments did not have any concerns specifically. The proposed redesignation does comply with our municipal development plan, Section 8, being our residential policies, and the group country residential land use strategy, as the parcels are considered poor non-agricultural lands, being a title that is 20 acres or less. The proposed subdivision would not fragment high-quality agricultural land. There are no constraints or conflicts with regards to adjacent land uses. And the future subdivision is small scale and will not require any additional infrastructure to support the development, in that there's existing shallow utility services there, and there's an existing road network to which to access the parcel. This particular application we advertised in the September 13th and 20th editions of the Sunny South News, and also sent a direct notice to all of the adjacent and affected landowners. The county did not receive any comments as a result of that notification from any of the adjacent landowners with regards to the proposed redesignation. So with that, I have recommended that second and third reading of the bylaw could be approved by County Council based off of the policies of both the Municipal Development Plan and the Group Country Residential Land Use Strategy. I'll put it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for council discussion.
Thank you, Hilary. As this is a public hearing, this is council's opportunity to receive input from the public. Having said that, it does not look like anyone is currently in the room to provide that public input. Are there any comments or concerns that were brought forward to you, Hilary?
No, we did not receive any phone calls, no written statements, or any emails with regards to this particular redesignation.
Thank you, Hilary. I would ask that if there's anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw, this is your opportunity. I would again ask if there's anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw. And a third time, I would ask if anyone was wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Morris has moved to close the public hearing for bylaw 22-013. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. With that, we could resume the public portion of the meeting. Is there any questions of Hillary from council at this time? And if not, there is a recommendation before us. How would you like to proceed? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that bylaw 22-014 be read for a second time.
1-3.
Or-
We'll do 1-3 first, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. my
That's
bad.
okay.
1-3. 22-013.
John has moved the recommendation that bylaw 22-013 be read a second time. Any discussion? I will call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And third reading. Clause?
I'll move that bylaw 22-013 be read for the third time.
Thank you, Clause. Clause has moved the recommendation that bylaw 22-013 be read a third time. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
And with that, we again can recess our regular meeting. And before us, we have the public hearing for bylaw 22-014 to redesignate a portion of Plan 101-2154, Block 5, Lot 1 in the southeast 610-20-W4 from rural agriculture to grouped country residential. I'd ask for a motion to open the public hearing. Eric? Eric has moved to open the public hearing for bylaw 22-014. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act as amended. The public hearing is being live streamed via the county's YouTube channel. The public hearing for bylaw 22-014 is now officially open. I will now ask the Supervisor of Planning and Development to review the nature of the hearing and provide an overview of what is being proposed. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with regards to bylaw 22-014, they are requesting to subdivide out a 6.5, the future subdivision of 6.5 acres in the very south end of their title. Prior to that, they were required, as per the county's municipal development plan, that they redesignate that portion of land to group country residential. The reason being is that there is already a number of parcels out of the larger, like the southeast 610-20 west of the 4th quarter section, and adjacent group country residential development already there. Our policy states that if you wish to subdivide beyond what is allowed in that particular, for residential purposes, that you are required to redesignate, and if there's 3 to 4 lots, you have to provide a concept plan to support your particular application. The applicant has done so. In their application, they have also supplied a conceptual design scheme that was prepared by Brown Okamura and Associates to support their application. The purpose of the conceptual design scheme is to look at things such as general drainage patterns, the access soils, and the access to utilities. The application, as you can see on the the photo that I have up, aerial image, is that the larger title is much larger than just a quarter section of land. It encompasses portions of 3 quarter sections, being the northeast 610-20 west of the 4th, the northwest 610-20 west of the 4th, and the southeast 610-20 west of the 4th. The applicant, so their title is 308 acres at this point in time. The application was circulated to county departments and external agencies for review. No concerns or objections were received from internal departments or any external agencies with regards to this application. Particularly SMRID was circulated on this application due to the proximity to 8 Mile Lake and associated irrigation infrastructure in the area. The proposed redesignation complies somewhat with the county's municipal development plan and group country residential land use strategy. The lands that they are considering for the rezoning and subdivision are currently poor non-agricultural land outside of the irrigation pivot as it stands today. The subdivision would not create an agricultural title that is less than 80 acres. There are no constraints or conflicts with adjacent uses, as the group country residential development would be consistent with the development that's currently in the area. The future subdivision of 2 parcels is small scale and will not require any additional infrastructure such as roads to support the development, and also no stormwater management facilities would be required to support the subdivisions, because the lot sizes are large enough to accommodate on-site stormwater. The one, with regards to the group country residential land use strategy, it does say that if there's an agricultural title that is more than 80 acres, that the parcel should not be subdivided. In this case, we are looking at the actual area, I guess, with regards to the 6.5 acres. And given the irregular configuration of that portion of the title, it was deemed that there was merit to the application and the subdivision of this particular southern portion of the title, given how previous subdivisions had been approved in the past and how the road network and title was oriented. The proposed bylaw was advertised in the September 13th and 20th editions of the Sunny South News, and also sent to the adjacent and affected landowners. I did receive, after I wrote this report, 1 phone call from an adjacent landowner with regards to the application that they had received, and they did have some concerns that they wanted council to hear. And their concerns specifically were that they did not feel that the proposed bylaw met the intent of the group country residential land use strategy, in that the parcel and area in question is usable good agricultural land. Their experience, this particular landowner had been there for quite some time, was that the area in question had been under a wheel move previously, so it was irrigated. But it is noted to date that since they've put in the irrigation pivot, that it does appear from my site visit and also from the image that you see before you today, that that particular southern portion of the parcel does not seem to be under irrigation at this point in time. It seems to be quite dry next to the road. But that is something that county council, when you're deliberating the merits of this application, that you can consider with regards to this particular area, if you feel there's merit in taking the subdivision or the rezoning the area for future subdivision based off of that particular criteria or not. I did pull up a, just for council's consideration, just a map of the area just to kind of further clarify the land base that we're dealing with here. So the northwest is 154 acres, so pretty much an intact quarter section in terms of land base. The area to the east is 147.5 acres in total over both the northeast and southeast. And then you see that 6.5 acres to the south. So this area here, when you add that together, that was 154 acres in size, so almost technically a full quarter section in size with regards to land base. But just given the odd configuration of how the road went around 8 Mile Lake, previous subdivisions, this is what we're left with in terms of not perfectly square areas. So I'll leave this one up on the screen so you can kind of, if you have any questions about that, I can answer them afterwards. So with that, I have the recommendation that I've included in the agenda package is that County Council could proceed with second and third reading of Bylaw 22-014 if they saw merit with regards to the application, regardless of the parcel size area that's established in the group country residential land use strategy. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Hillary. This is council's opportunity to receive input from the public. Those making presentations are asked to state their name and review their points. We ask you refrain from asking questions of council. The intention of the public hearing is not to debate or defend the contents of the bylaw or the position which individual councillors may have on the bylaw. Questions asked of a councillor by a presenter may be ruled out of order. I'm not sure if the applicant is here to make a submission. But however, all others are afforded the opportunity to speak. And at this time, I would ask if there's anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? And I'll ask a third time. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? If there is nothing further, I would seek a motion to close the public hearing. Lauren has moved to close the public hearing for bylaw 22-014. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. With that, we can resume our regular meeting, and I would ask if there is any questions from council at this time. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is that one title currently, the purple and the blue?
Yes, through, to Councillor Van Essen through the chair, the whole title, that whole area is all one title under, so 308 acres in total.
Okay. That touches a little bit also on our last subdivision, making these larger parcels. And you start to get large and irregular parcels. And future looking, when something needs to get split back off, we made an exception to allow it based on large size, and then it gets cut off again. And to me, it doesn't look like a real cohesive way of going forward to make the parcel big, cut something off of it, and to be allowed to trim it down again later on. And then also the other point I wanted to make was, yeah, it is a dry corner right now, was irrigated. Does that mean we can adjust our irrigation styles, our methods, leave larger dry corners, and get subdivisions based on that? That it's like, oh, yeah, that land is not suitable anymore. With a little bit of thought or planning, we could make more parcels into that method. So that'd be my only concerns with it.
Thank you, Eric. Any further comments or discussion from council? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my comment would just be, given the irregular shape of that area and that roadway, that this piece would make sense just to shave that piece off and give you more of a functional piece on the top end. That area's changed over the years since we first moved out into that area. But I think that just looking at this, that just makes that a little cleaner. And I understand what you're saying, but I think each individual case we just look at for its merits. So I don't have a problem with this at all.
Thank you, Mark. Any further comments or discussion? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one sort of question, I guess, and make sure that I understand the clarity of this. We're really just discussing rezoning the 6.5 acres within that parcel, that portion of that parcel, correct?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Curvis, right at this point in time, we're just looking at the rezoning of that 6.5 acre area. They would have to come back to County Council with regards to an actual subdivision also.
Thank you, Hillary. John?
Thank you. With that, I'd like to move that bylaw 22-014 be read for a second time.
John has moved that bylaw 22-014 be read a second time. Any further questions or discussion? Claus?
Yeah, just on the second the question that Councillor Eric had, with the possibility of doing this in dry corners and everything. Okay, couldn't we have that discussion at a later time?
Hillary, so I guess this all falls underneath our MDP, or correct?
So with regards to the dry corners, so typically it's somewhat addressed in our municipal development plan and the group country residential land use strategy. We don't, I think, explicitly state how we want to deal with all dry corners. We just say that you can have a first parcel out of a subdivision. Typically it is on these irrigated pivot quarters a dry corner. So we don't say that all dry corners can be subdivided out, but we do take it into consideration with regards to these types of applications that are looking to establish, is it poorer or higher quality agricultural land? An unirrigated pivot corner is obviously poor quality, just in the sense that it's not producing as much as the irrigation portion. But it could be a discussion that we'd have more fulsomely when we're looking at subdivision criteria.
Yeah, it would be, essentially it would be at council's discretion how you'd like to proceed with that. I don't know what the best way to phrase that, how to direct that. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only tricky part to this one is that was, or still could potentially be irrigated land. So that's the only difference it would be, but to irrigate with a pivot, yeah, no, not gonna happen.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we should have the discussion at another time on that, and I think we can just direct admin off council meeting at some point with that. Question though, on this, because we're rezoning it, do they have to give up their water rights on it?
With regards to the SMRID, I do believe at the time of subdivision, they would have to relinquish their water rights, not at the time of rezoning, because rezoning is not creating any new titles. It's when the titles are created that the St. Mary's Irrigation District would probably submit comments with regards to the subdivision and only sign off on it if those water rights were relinquished.
Yeah. I would suggest, if there is an appetite for council to, as Councillor Van Essen noted, we could provide that direction to administration. I would suggest we deal with the matter at hand. There is a recommendation before us and a motion has been made, but if council would like to direct administration through motion, we could do that as well. Okay, so John has moved that bylaw 22-014 be read a second time. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried? John?
I'd like to move that bylaw 22-014 be read a third time.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? John has moved that bylaw 22-014 be read a third time. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Anything further on this matter? If not, thank you very much, Hillary.
Thank you very much.
We do have a 10:30 delegation that I believe has arrived, so maybe we'll just take a short 5-minute recess and we will reconvene the meeting in 5 minutes. Thank you. order at 10:30 a.m. this morning. Maybe. Thank you. We'll call the meeting back to order at 10:30 this morning. We do have two proposed items for our closed session. Legal update, VoIP Section 27, privileged information, as well as our addition, in accordance with Section 17 of VoIP, disclosure harmful to personal privacy. So with that, I would ask for a motion to enter a closed session. Clause is moved that we enter a closed session. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? camera. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We can resume the public meeting at 11:34 this morning, and we will move down to item G1, delegations. We have an 11:30 with stars. Please come forward. Or Larry, if you'd like.
Mark knows the drill for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
You got a lot nicer system than you.
Trust you to notice, Maurice.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. Let's start with Mark.
Mark Sears, County Councilor for Division 3.
Okay.
I'm John Purvis, County Councilor for Division 4.
And I'm Claude Vanderveen, County Council for Division 6.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm Tori Campbell, Councilor Division 2 in County Reeve.
Morning, Eric Van Essen, Division 5.
Lauren Hickey, Division 1.
Morris East of Division 7.
Great, thank you. And I'm Glenda Farndon. I'm the Senior Municipal Relations Liaison for STARS. So very long handle, meaning that I work with all rural and municipal and urban councils across the entire province of Alberta as well as BC. And very pleased to have Martin as my colleague now to represent and work with us in the southern Alberta areas, which I know that you're all very familiar with him. And we're very, very pleased to have him. So, should we? Please, yeah. Okay. Well, we really appreciate this opportunity to reconnect with your council again. You know, we have had previous opportunities to bring you information, but of course then COVID happened and we've all been kind of separated again, so it's wonderful to have normal life again and be able to be in person. So we appreciate that. Will the presentation be up on screen or is it? I didn't know, like, do they just already have it on themselves? Oh, I see. I'll just pull it up here for you. I appreciate that. Just have to scroll down. Okay, thank you very much. Can you do the scrolling?
I can.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. So first and foremost, you know, we want to say that we have built municipal partnerships across the entire province for 37 years now. And that is, the partnership is what allows STARS to provide critical care anywhere. So our Emergency Link Center is located in Calgary. It's a 24/7 safety network. They have access to every available resource. So we work with all, you know, ground ambulance, we work with Halo, we dispatch Halo, we work with Alpine, you know, any kind of search and rescue, we work with all the fire departments. They're all our chain of survival partners. So with that aspect, we also have GIS mapping and as well as preset coordinates to help us locate the patient. Our transport physicians provide the medical guidance on all calls deemed critical. And so it helps to determine the mechanism of injury or illness and to determine and dispatch or deploy the appropriate level of response. So there's approximately a 1-to-10 ratio for STARS assistance, meaning that if a community were to say, let's see, 10 missions per year, it's very likely that STARS is also in the background, also assisted on up to 100 calls per year in that same area, because we're able to provide that initial assistance, provide that medical guidance, have virtual consultation with your local physicians at your hospitals, those types of things. Last year, we're currently at 99 emergency requests received every day across our 6 bases in 3 provinces, serving 4 provinces across Western Canada, and over 36,000 emergency requests were received last year. So we decided to take this one step further in order to provide more assistance to communities. So minutes count, and our transport physicians are now coordinating the complex logistical arrangements with the receiving hospitals for such things as scheduling a neurosurgeon, mobilizing a specialty team, scheduling the cardiac cath lab, or even the CAT scanner, which would be mandatory when we're dealing with a stroke patient. So physicians are now able to have face-to-face virtual consultation in order to make face-to-face decisions. We are now able to transmit in real time diagnostic test results while we are en route to the hospital. It is positive results that's coming from that. So for critical and trauma patients now, upon arriving at the receiving hospital, they could go directly into the operating room. We are seeing improved patient outcomes. It is a game changer.
Thank you, Glenda. And it's kind of a neat thing, of course, as STARS grows and evolves. One of the things that has happened over the last few years is that STARS has a new fleet of helicopters. So in the past, the STARS flew the Airbus BK-117, which served faithfully for about 30 years, but they were getting a little bit long in the tooth. You can imagine the difference between a car from 30 years ago and a car today. So over the last few years, all levels of government in Canada, so federal, provincial, and municipal, have helped fund, along with large private sector donors, a new fleet of helicopters for all the bases across Western Canada, and it's the Airbus H-145. It's like the next generation of that same family. So it, as you could expect from a helicopter that's 30 years newer, it outperforms the BK-117. It's more powerful, it's faster, still has the twin engines for safety and reliability, can fly higher and longer, and it's safer. The avionics are also improved for night flying, flying in the mountains, and flying in different weather. The other kind of neat thing is that it has a 5-bladed system here, and it can lift more. So whether it's in the mountains or you just have more to carry on a mission, the H-145 is better suited for that. So it's great. We've got these new helicopters again across all the bases in Western Canada, and we look forward to decades worth of good service with them. And another kind of nice thing, just a final thought about that, is that because they're newer, and you know how it is with equipment, newer means increased availability and lower cost, especially lower maintenance and operating costs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the helicopters on the outside that are a step forward. The interior of the H-145s are essentially like a full airborne intensive care unit. So you basically get in the back of a STARS helicopter the same level of care as you would get when you first arrive at the hospital in the trauma suite. So on every mission, you've got world-class expertise with a critical care flight nurse and a trained ALS paramedic. Sometimes, if the mission warrants, there will even be a doctor on board, but even if there's not a doctor on board, they can be patched in virtual reality, as Glenda was saying, and provide supervision and medical oversight as the flight takes place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of comes from the virtual enhancement. There's Bluetooth on board there, integrated Wi-Fi, and satellite connectivity. So again, those doctors at the emergency center are providing that oversight as the helicopter flies and advising the nurse and the paramedic. There's cutting-edge diagnostic tools on board, as you would expect in an airborne surgical suite. So things like oxygen and intubation equipment. There's also an ultrasound, and that can be very critical if somebody has crushed lungs or collapsed lungs or internal bleeding. They can make a diagnosis there and start to provide appropriate treatment even as the helicopter flies, and also let the receiving hospital know what to expect as the helicopter's coming in to land and deliver the patient. There's night vision goggles. So STARS is the only Canadian service that operates with night vision goggles. So whether it's 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning or the middle of the afternoon, STARS can fly because of that capability with night vision. And then one of the most exciting things is there's now blood on board. So every STARS helicopter, every STARS flight has 2 units of universal donor blood. That's O negative. So they can give a transfusion even if there's a victim that's bleeding out internally or externally, they can get a transfusion again before they even arrive at the hospital. So it's cutting edge medical care that's airborne. It's not purely just transportation.
And STARS is fueled by generosity. We have still, to date, we had a 10-year affiliation agreement with Alberta Health Services, which expired in 2020. We've been year to year since, due to COVID, just wondering where that's going. So it has previously been 20% government funding, 80% fundraising of $39 million per year for 3 bases in Alberta: Grand Prairie, Edmonton, and Calgary. So going forward, earlier this year, Alberta Health Services did say that they would be making an increase to 50% government funding, which would align them with what we already received from Saskatchewan government as well as Manitoba government for those bases out of Winnipeg, Regina, and Saskatoon. Currently, though, we're in high-level discussions as we speak to see, because they've not yet said when we might be able to see that additional funding. So currently, still remains at 20% government funding for now. Of course, we've had many challenges because of COVID, 2 years of not being able to have fundraising events, these types of things, not being able to have a presence in rural communities for the calendar campaign. It's been very, very challenging as we are starting to try and rebuild those programs, as well as site registration programs. So that is now, we are back up to over 4,000 industry sites. So this is all levels of industry. Municipalities as well are a part of that. We have many municipalities have farmers and ranchers who have their farms and ranches registered, because there is no changes to their location, so it's a mere $150 per year for them to be a site, which also benefits their neighbors as far as being a registered site if there should be an incident that happens in the immediate area. We have municipalities that register just for a weekend for an annual rodeo event or those types of things where they can have direct access to STARS and the STARS transport positions immediately, as well as having access that we know every single other resource within the area who can respond. On the expenditure side, you can see that more than 3/4 of the pie are aviation and medical related. Very small piece is the Emergency Link Center at 6%, and of course base operations and administration. For 3 bases across Alberta, we still for the 3rd year remain at 12% for administration costs. CRA allows up to 35%, so we very much feel we're doing our due diligence in this area. And as I said, municipalities, they recognize STARS as an essential service, as well as an asset of the emergency protective services that they provide for their residents. This is showing leadership above and beyond. Currently, across Alberta, we have 90% of rural municipalities, as well as working with urban municipalities on board of the Municipal Initiative Program. Now, currently, many are on a per capita basis annually. Others are on an annual fixed rate, which they have included as a standing motion in their emergency protective services budget each year to help support STARS operations across the province, but more importantly, that we're working together to ensure a robust health and safety network for all Albertans, regardless of where they may travel across Western Canada. Currently, in this initiative, also, the entire northeastern region of BC, we serve them out of Grand Prairie, and they have been on board with this program as well, because out of Grand Prairie, we are the only service like this available to them, and so they've been supportive for almost 16 years now. So they all, as well as the 7 municipalities you see in the red boxes, have all received logo recognition, having reached, some of them, over $3 million now over many years of support. So they are represented on STARS helicopters. We have 2 more logo unveilings coming up for Sturgeon County as well as Birch Hills County now. And collectively, as a united effort, we are currently generating over $2 million in operational support each year.
So thank you, Glenda, for kind of giving the provincial overview. I think it's also important to kind of look at what's happening locally here within Lethbridge County boundaries. So if you look at the table that we have up there, you kind of see over the last 5 years, and including 2022 up until August 31st, the number of missions that STARS has flown during that time period. Now, it's kind of interesting, you see, of course, the most numerous there are to the Lethbridge Regional Hospital and interfacility transfers, but that also includes, because most scene calls originate with a ground ambulance, possibly rural, that then transfers the patient to Lethbridge Hospital, and though you often see the STARS helicopter flying into the Lethbridge Hospital. My old house here in Lethbridge was under the flight path, and I can kind of personally attest to the fact that, you know, at least once a week you see the STARS helicopter flying over. So you can see that over time there, it's 60 plus missions a year on average that STARS flies in to the greater Lethbridge area, within Lethbridge County boundaries. And some of the people that are being picked up and transferred by STARS are Lethbridge County residents. And the interesting thing is, of course, we don't live in a stationary society. People travel, especially if you're in a rural area, whether you travel into the city for an appointment or you travel to a neighboring rural municipality, people are on the roads. So it is a little bit about that community and building those partnerships. So just to kind of have a quick overview here, in the greater southern Alberta region, areas where Lethbridge County residents may travel reasonably, one might expect, over that same time period, the last 5 years, and to this year, up to August 31st, you see there's been almost 1,000 missions flown here in southern Alberta. So STARS is extremely active and working in that chain of survival with the other partners, whether it's ambulance services, Alberta Health Services, search and rescue, working to help save lives and make a critical care difference.
Thank you, Martin. So this particular slide, this has been 10 years in the making, being able to now utilize patient postal code, no other information, just patient postal code of where they lived and county residents within your boundaries, and showing that there has been, since 2010, that was as far back as we could go with data, almost 500 patients have been flown who lived within the Lethbridge County boundaries. So when we look on the right-hand side then, this is pointing to the locations where these residents had traveled and needed STARS. So you can see that they were flown across several provinces, for Saskatchewan, all across Alberta, even into southeastern BC, that we have flown these residents. It's very much showing it as a testament that partnership is the reason that we are building this robust health and safety network together, and that STARS is available to your residents across Western Canada. STARS was born out of necessity. On a fateful day, December 1st, 1985, a critically ill newborn from Lethbridge County was flown by STARS as the very first mission, Kelly Waldron. Her mission radically changed the delivery of critical care across Alberta and now across Western Canada with our expansion to 6 bases. Today, STARS has flown more than 50,000 missions since that fateful day, and more importantly, because of partnership with no cost to the patient. So our request is that we would welcome Lethbridge County to join our other municipal leaders across the province and help us to continue to build a life-saving partnership and support the fact of having a robust health and safety network for all Albertans, including your residents and area. So we're asking for you to join this municipal initiative, asking for a minimum $2 per capita per year. On the municipal initiative, we have municipalities that range from $2 per capita to $90 per capita, and everything in between. So we'd like to ask this as a 3-year commitment, which would be in conjunction with your council term, knowing that a life is saved every day, and it's partnership that has made it possible. So we welcome to for Lethbridge County to join us.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think, obviously terrific work that STARS does. I know just personally myself, we were traveling on a highway south of town here, and you see the cars backed up, and you could see that there was an accident in the distance, and to see and hear that air ambulance come in, and it was obviously I think frightening because the severity of what's happened, but also reassuring to know that service is there, and that level of service is available to all residents of Alberta and your coverage area. So thank you for being here today, and I would open it up to council for any questions they might have. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you had talked about the new helicopters. Does that mean your flying range will be extended? Say, like, because when I looked at the statistics you had for the county of Warner, are you able now to fly into the county of Warner without refueling, like before with the other helicopters? About where I am is about the end without refueling. So is that range extended now?
Well, because of the increased fuel efficiency, and some different components of the weight of the helicopter, all of those things, depending, of course, on weather conditions and winds and those types of things. But the pilots are saying that they are seeing that we can fly up to about 30 minutes extended flight time as the crow flies. So it is a bit of a larger range. Of course, as well, we still continue to have fuel caches available in many, many different areas. We're still continuing to work with municipalities to increase fuel cache availability in many areas. We're working with Service Club as well on a portable type of fuel cache trailer, so that can be movable as well. We're looking to work with HS2, Technologies on another fuel shed that will be located more in the kind of Wainwright area to help with coverage. So as we increase all these additional partnerships and fuel caches, then certainly we are going to continue to expand reach.
And if I could just add, Councillor Hickey, a little bit, County of Warner, like many southern Alberta rural municipalities, is large. So possibly in the northwest corner, depending on the wind conditions, as Glenda was saying, it may be possible to do it without refueling. In the southeast corner of Warner County, possibly not. It really kind of depends, but certainly you have greater range with the H145 compared to the BK117.
And one other thing you touched on was the registered site. Does that mean, could you just explain a little more on that? What does that mean, or what are you?
That's largely used by industry, so oil and gas, forestry, as well as agricultural, where they would call in and register a site where they may, municipalities as well, we use that as an example, where you may have staff member that's going to be working alone in a very remote area. So then you can call in, register all your coordinates and sites of where this would be, whether it's for $6 per day on just a very temporary time frame, or the $150 a year, and it's a permanent site. So this is where we have more than 4,000 sites collectively, all registered with the proper information. So that allows our emergency link center, if a call should come in that there's been a severe accident happen, we can bring up the location of, if they say, I just saw a STARS site registered and it was number 1, 2, 3, 4. We can bring that up immediately on the screens, see all the locations, know whether or not what other resources are available throughout the area. This is including HALO as well as ground ambulance, all these other opportunities to utilize these other resources, as well as maybe an industry site 1 kilometer down the road might have a basic life paramedic, someone else that we can send immediately while other resources are being coordinated. So this is the opportunity, and as I said, largely used by industry. We also work with them to build emergency response plans. We also work with municipalities for work alone programs. So there's many different aspects included in what is now called Vigilant. It's our Vigilant program or site registration.
Interestingly, if I can just add, some Hutterite colonies have registered as well, just because of, to have that extra capacity there if should something go wrong, that STARS would know right away and can mobilize all those resources. So industry largely, some municipalities, and even some Hutterite colonies.
Yeah.
Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just gotta say this. Is it fair to say that Kelly Waldron is 37 years old?
Yes.
No, what is your relationship with the other air ambulances as Halo and the one up north and everything like that? Like,
Okay.
how do you work together?
Okay, well, we work together in the sense, for Halo down in southeastern Alberta, as well as Phoenix, helicopters out of the Fort Mac area, like, that all comes through the Emergency Link Center. We dispatch those helicopters. So working with our transport physicians, they help to determine what would be the proper resources and the level of care that may be needed. They take into to consideration that, yes, Halo is very co-located to your area. Certainly, we don't want to leave the patient on the side of the road. If they are able to respond immediately, they can take the patient to the nearest hospital for stabilization, whatever may be needing to occur, at the same time that we may be coordinating in the background that this patient still needs to go to tertiary care, maybe needs trauma surgery, whatever the case, or the cardiac cath lab. All of that coordination is going on in the background while we are dispatching all the available resources in the area. So we very much work together as far as what is best for the patient. That is the bottom line. What is best for the patient? And then we can coordinate. Sometimes we rendezvous. We may rendezvous with Halo. We may rendezvous with Alberta Health Services Fixed Wing at an airport, or ground ambulance. Like, it's a combination of everything. There's a chart of call that determines all the different levels of how many minutes it takes for response of all these different resources to put it all together to have a complete plan for that particular patient, dependent on the circumstances.
Any other questions from council? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, just a comment. I'd personally like to thank you guys for what you do, because one of our family members had to utilize your services and his life was saved as a result of your actions.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anything further from council? Anything further you'd like to add?
Just the fact that, we embrace the fact that we've been here for 37 years because of Albertans. And it is a united effort, and we just really hope that you will consider to become a partner with us and help us to move forward for our future generations. Much like the generations before us for the last 37 years did for us when STARS was born out of necessity. So as we move forward and look forward to the next 35 and 40 years, we'd love to have that partnership that ensures that we will all continue to have access to this service.
Martin?
And if I may just add to that, back in 1985, some of you may remember this, the STARS helicopter was a white helicopter with the Lions Club logo on the side of it, and was a shoestring budget. And now we've grown to a fleet of 10 advanced helicopters based in 3 provinces, 6 bases, and serving into southeast and northeastern BC. So it's grown and evolved over time, trying to provide that best level of cares with our partners in the chain of survival. And again, as Glenda says, and said very well, it really depends on those partnerships and that addition. And then just on a personal note, it's a pleasure for me to be back here to see you all again in a different role, but to see you nonetheless. Thank you for your interest and your questions. It's wonderful. And yes, I continue to be here in Lethbridge, serving in Southern Alberta on behalf of STARS.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We brought you just a couple of items. The brand new calendar is out starting for next year, so brought you one as well. And the latest patient stories in our horizons. And this is very near and dear to our heart. She is the wife of one of our STARS pilots. So very compelling story. I hope that you'll take a chance to have a read.
Thank you so
again
much.
for your
Many
time
thanks
and for
again.
your consideration.
So lunch is here, so why don't we, break for lunch? Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll call the meeting back to order at 12:34. Just before we move on with our agenda, the last delegation, our STARS delegation, as part of their presentation, they did make a request. I would just put it to council how you would like to proceed with that. Would you like to direct administration, accept for information, move forward? How would you like to proceed? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct administration to come back with some recommendations.
Draft a report. Okay, thank you. So, sorry, you moved that, Claus?
Yeah.
Okay. Claus has made a motion regarding item G1 that council direct administration to bring back a report regarding the STARS request to a future council meeting. Does that capture it, Claus? Awesome. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving down now, we can move down to corporate services, H2, H2.1, the Diamond City Community Association request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have actually 4 requests before you this afternoon.
Can I stop you for a second, Jen?
Yes.
This was a comment that was made to me that I need to do a better job of introducing staff so that people following at home. Okay. So I would like to welcome our Manager of Finance and Administration, Jennifer Place, to come forward. Jen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very formal. So the first request before us has come from the Diamond City Community Association, and this request is with regards to having Lethbridge County act as a charitable partner on their behalf for their Diamond City Hall upgrade donations that they're looking to receive and do some fundraising for. Currently, the association does not have charitable status and therefore cannot issue donation receipts for income tax purposes to any donees that they might have. The Canadian government does state that registered municipalities are qualified donees and can issue official donation receipts for income tax purposes. This request also aligns with the council's strategic value of relationships. Building strong relationships with our internal and external stakeholders strengthens the broader community. In 2018, a similar request was brought forward to council from the Lethbridge United Services Institute for their project. As you may recall, they were building a memorial statue, and the county did act as a donee on their behalf. We would collect donations, issue receipts, and then provide those funds back to the association for their use towards that particular project. So I've included that council resolution back from 2018. Additionally, the recommendation is that council does move forward with this, similar to the 2018 request. Another option would be not to act as a charitable partner. The pro, I guess it would lessen some administration, although there isn't really a whole lot of administration attached to that. Usually we collect the payments. Every quarter we look at the balance unless they request it sooner and forward those funds to the association. The con would be that if council were to deny this request, that receipts would not be issued to donors by the community association and therefore may deter people from donating because of that.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the recommendation that is before us, I think that, we've got to help them with the community hall as much as possible, and I think this is only a little part of that we could do as a county, so I'll move that the Lethbridge County agrees to commit Lethbridge County to act as a charitable partner and issue charitable tax receipt for donations made for the Diamond City Community Hall upgrades.
Thank you, Claus. Any discussion? Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, are they planning on becoming a registered society later on? Like, didn't the Shaughnessy one do that?
I couldn't say offhand if Shaughnessy is for sure registered, and I'm not sure what the community Diamond City's plans are. I think there's quite a few hoops to jump through now as far as getting that registration, but it may be something they're looking at I'm not sure.
Thank you, Jen. Any further questions? Any further discussion? Clauses move the recommendation. The county council agrees to commit Lethbridge County to act as a charitable partner and issue charitable tax receipts for donations made for the Diamond City Community Hall upgrades. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Jen. You move
you.
down to 2.2, Pitcher Butte High School sponsorship request.
Mr. Chairman, too, if I could just add before we
Absolutely.
move to 2.2 there. I believe I mentioned this in my financial report, but I know Councillor Hickey had asked me on the council tour that the Diamond City Community Association has been able to receive all of the money they needed through fundraising for the boiler and haven't had to borrow any from
Shaughnessy.
or pardon me, Shaughnessy. Just reminded me of that. Hasn't had to borrow any from the
Okay.
county at this time. I did let them know that the resolution stands if they get into the project, and you know how things are going these days. But it sounded like they were doing well.
That's good to know. Thank you.
As far as the next request, this is from the Pitcher Butte High School. I believe this letter came forward to council at the last council meeting, and administration was asked to bring forward a report. So the county received a letter from the Pitcher Butte High School regarding the upcoming ASAA 1A Girls Volleyball Provincial Tournament that the school is hosting. There'll be 12 teams from across the province participating in the tournament, which is being held November 24th to 26th of this year. There are costs associated with hosting this type of event, and the school has reached out for sponsorship requests and has included the county in that. The reason, pardon me, the recommendation has been made to provide a sponsorship in the amount of $500 per the donation policy is that it does meet donation policies number 161, section 1 for eligibility, which is a consideration of providing support of community programs, organizations, events, activities through donations shall be limited to those that demonstrate any of the following: a financial need, are held for the enjoyment and benefit of the general public, are hosted on a yearly basis to recognize significant milestones in events, and or take place within the county boundaries. Additionally, there is section 1.1B3, which speaks to youth and adult sports teams and associated programs and events, activities, and school reunions, which again, this request would fall under. The $500 donation would cover the cost of a championship game. As per the letter, they had different sponsorship levels, and the $500 within the policy would at least cover one of their games. There wouldn't be much financial impact other than the $500 could come from the council donation reserve, which is sitting at just over $20,000. Council could, of course, deny this request for funding. Pro, that it would eliminate that expense to the county, and the con would be that it would contradict the purpose of the donations policy in administration's mind. I have attached for you the letter of the from the Pitcher Butte High School, as well as a copy of the policy 161.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions from council? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To administration, when I was looking at the guidelines, and I hate to be the fly in the ointment on this, but it says the following are not eligible for support under this policy. So
Oh, did I grab the wrong one?
1B3
That's my bad then.
says
So I
youth
guess
and
that would be a
adult sports
con.
teams. Yeah.
Pardon me, I did enter that incorrectly. That should be my con. So there you go. I guess it's in
Eric?
council's hands.
Thanks, John, for doing your due diligence homework, and that is actually a little bit my concern too, is then any event of any sort is now eligible, and whether it's baseball to basketball to, however many things go on throughout the county within it. So I'd actually struggle to support it anyway. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Anything further? How would council like to proceed? Eric?
I'd like to make a motion that the county does not support.
Could we try to avoid negative motions? If you could raise it in a, I see where you're going, but.
Okay.
Deny?
Then I guess I make
You can make the motion, but you don't have to support the motion that you make.
move that the county council support ASAA 1A girls volleyball tournament being held at Bishop Butte High School by providing sponsorship in the amount of $500 per donation policy for 6-1 from the donation reserve.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved the recommendation. Any further discussion? I will call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Thank you. Moving down to H2.3, tax penalty waiver request.
So before you is a penalty waiver request in the amount of $177.75. A letter was received, or I guess the administrative office was contacted first to inquire about a penalty waiver following receipt of a tax statement from the county indicating that the 2022 tax levy was outstanding and a 5% penalty had been added. As noted in the attached letter, it was understood by Ms. Houston that the taxes had been paid in full by her mother, who has, I believe, since passed, and who found out later that that was not, in fact, the case. Therefore, she just put forward a request under the circumstances to see if council would consider waiving the $177.75 that were applied to the tax roll. We've had a few of these this year, so I'm pretty sure council's familiar with what the current penalty bylaw states. And of course, there's always the option to waive if that was council's choice. That would have satisfied the request, but there's the tax penalty bylaw in place, and it could set precedent for other requests coming forward, and we do have another one following this.
Thank you, Jen. Just out of curiosity, Jen, roughly how many tax rolls are there in the county?
Over 10,000, I believe.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Claus?
I will move the recommendation that county council not waive tax penalties in the amount of $177.75 as requested for tax roll 38450-100.
Eric?
Thank you. So once again, to be the opposing side of that, first was that a positive recommendation. Now what you move that that we do approve it.
Larry, and maybe if I was out of bounds on the last one, Larry, please, I would defer to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The general rule of thumb is that if no motion at all accomplishes the same task as making a negative motion, don't make the motion as a negative motion. But if it serves some purpose to make a negative motion, sends a point, sends a message, and it's distinct and definitive, it's appropriate. So in this case that Councillor Van Essen raises, and I was just thinking about that as we were going through here.
I think we all were.
Observing. The challenge, I think, with making a positive motion when in fact the hope or intent of the mover of the motion is to have that motion defeated, is that it looks as if that individual supports the motion because they made it in a positive manner, although they vote against it. So, it really comes down to perception. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think in the end, both, even if the motion is left as it is and it's adopted, we've accomplished the same thing. In the case of the Picture Butte High School, no funds will be forthcoming, and in the case of this request, it's being denied. So, not hard and fast rule. Again, there are some, high-level guidelines. Technically, don't make the negative motion, but if it accomplishes something and sends the message that is the intention of the mover and council, go that route.
So my apologies if I... Go ahead.
We get these coming in, and some of them, in my opinion, have some pretty worthwhile logic behind them. Is there anywhere in history or in the books of some degree of a leniency period, whether it's a few weeks because they weren't notified, anything of that, is there, can you touch on that, please?
I can touch on a couple points there. So notices are issued in May with a July 31st due date. They're advertised in several places, social media, Sunny South, our newsletters, etc. And then we have a bylaw in place to apply that penalty. We do allow for, because usually the 31st falls over a long weekend or a holiday, we do allow a week to collect everything, and we use postmarked envelopes and such as per the Municipal Government Act. When a statement is sent and someone calls and says, oh, I paid this, we always ask them to say, oh, if you paid it at the bank, can you provide proof that it happened on the 31st? Or if it was sent in the mail, we keep all of those envelopes for proof of postmark. We verify addresses at that time to make sure we have been sending to the correct address. So we don't, as administration, we don't have the authority to go against the bylaw. We have to apply the penalty, and it's up to council's discretion to waive or not waive that penalty that's been applied. But on the administration side, before these come forward, we do try to communicate and work with the individuals to make sure that it wasn't an error on possibly our part or a miscommunication with addressing or something else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John and then Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe administration could just clarify. It's my understanding that if there was a situation where it was improperly mailed out, then we would get that information as well. Like if the tax roll notice was mailed to an address that didn't exist or didn't belong to these people, that's something that would be presented in front of us to consider, correct?
Yes, that's right. Like, I think we've had a couple come forward before where we did verify addresses when there was a claim that it wasn't received. The Municipal Government Act also does say that if an item is not, or a tax notice is not returned to the municipality within 7 to 10 days, I can't remember exactly, of the date it's mailed, is perceived to have been received.
Mark?
Just a question, Jeff. So after July 31st, so in this case here, the taxes have been paid. When does the notice go out to say to the residents saying your taxes haven't been paid?
We don't, because of the number of tax rolls that we have, we don't send out notices specific to those unpaid. We just advertise and send out reminders of the tax due date, and then once penalty is applied, we send a statement.
Yeah, this one I was just looking at September 15th, so it would have been a month and a half after, but based on her letter, they were under the assumption that it had been paid. She talked to her mother who pays the bills, and she passed away. So to me, that's, at some point, do we say, okay, that on a compassionate sort of piece, I get the whole precedent setting piece, but in a case like this, it's not a huge amount of dollars, but it's just, to me, at some point, what are we going to, are we going to eventually say, okay, we waive the fee because there's a case being made for it. There's a lot of others that aren't. Anyway, that's just
Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have waived for taxes in the past, only a couple times, and they were mostly due to death in the family or an illness where the person was incapacitated.
Thanks, Lauren. Anything further? How would council like to proceed? Did you make a motion? Sorry. So there is a motion. So you move the recommendation, sorry. So Colossus move the recommendation that county council not waive tax penalties in the amount of $177.75 as requested for tax roll 38450-100. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? My math is slow today, I apologize. That is carried. Moving down, H2.4. Tax penalty waiver, 488-64500.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is another request that came in from Mr. and Mrs. Fender with regards to their penalty for late payment. It was received 3 days after the July 31st due date, and a penalty of $229.64 was applied. It is a 5% calculation on their current 2020 tax amount. In his letter, he speaks to a 600% tax penalty, I'm not sure what was meant by that or if it was a typo, but I can assure you that that's not the case here. I did double check the math on it. There wasn't a lot of information in the letter. They just felt that, due to the closeness of the timing of their payment to the due date, that they would bring forward a request to council to waive the $229.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reference to the 600%, and I mean, this information is not in front of us here, what was their total tax roll?
I can quickly tell you that. Give me 1 second. Also, as per the bylaw, and I don't know if maybe this is where there's some confusion, the 5% penalties are added only on the current levy. That's all that it gets applied to. The 15% amount is applied to any outstanding balances after December 31st. So their actual current 2022 tax levy was $4,146.80. Oh, pardon me. They also had a local improvement on top of that, so $45.92.
5%.
Yeah.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that county council not waive the tax penalty in the amount of $229.64 as requested for tax roll 488-64500.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Claus?
Yeah, I assume you're gonna send them a letter that they, can you also explain how much percent that is instead of 600%? Just clarify it for them.
Yes, through the chair. Candace always follows up with letters following meetings, so I'll work with her on including some information from the actual bylaw.
Thank you, Jen. Eric?
I think I know where they got their 600% from. That amount of dollars on 3 days multiplied out by days of the year would be 600% per annum.
I didn't get that detailed with it.
Jen said thanks, Eric.
So John has moved the recommendation the county council not waive tax penalties in the amount of $229.64 as requested for tax roll 488-64500. Any further discussion? If not, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Jen.
You.
And now we'll move down to administration, and I believe our Director of Community Services, Larry Randall. H3.1, 2023 council meeting schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council. As noted, we're looking at the short report 2023 council meeting schedule. To summarize, administration is recommending that the proposed 2023 council meeting schedule be approved today. It's framed up currently so that there would be one council meeting only scheduled for the months of January, February, March, and then in the summer months of July and August. What that works out to is 19 scheduled council meetings per year, or for the year. For the dates in 2023, historically, over the past few years especially, we've seen, I think, in the early part of the year, the first 3 months, the first quarter of a year, there are lots of conferences and workshops, training, strategic planning events, and so on, and it gets very difficult to schedule a second council meeting. So we scheduled one or proposed one only for those months. And then again in the summer, I think historically for quite some time now, the county has simply dialed it back to one council meeting per month or one scheduled council meeting per month, just to accommodate summer schedules, which tend to be different for all of us. I think living in a northern country like Canada, summertime, we're all out and about and busy. So that's what is being proposed here. In the procedural bylaw, it does say that regular meetings are to be held every first and third Thursday of each month, with the exceptions being July and August, or as council decides otherwise. And I think that's what we're looking at here today with what we're proposing. Just a couple examples of what's happening early in the year. For 2023, the Agricultural Service Board Provincial Conference is in mid-January. February is a short month already, of course, and the Brownlee Virtual Emerging Trends Conference, I think it's a 2-day event, is held during the third week of February when we might otherwise have a council meeting. March has the Rural Municipalities of Alberta Conference, Convention rather, from March 20th to 21st, again, right in that kind of third week, kind of conflicts with that second meeting of the month. Keeping in mind as well, of course, that should emergent issues that need immediate attention arise, it's always possible to call a special meeting with very short notice. So, that doesn't hinder or handcuff council entirely if there's only one regular meeting scheduled in a particular month. Just some points to consider when thinking about this. The pros of adopting the schedule as presented, it'll allow attendance by county council at some of those conferences and events that we've mentioned. Council also has, of course, the option to not set meeting dates at all. Interestingly, in the Municipal Government Act, council is not required to set in advance for a year a meeting schedule. And there as well, there's no requirement to advertise this publicly. However, I think it has been the practice at Lethbridge County, and in my humble opinion, it's good public relations and good openness to let people know when meetings are scheduled and so on. And helps everyone as well who participates in the meeting, you folks as elected officials in particular, to know your schedules well ahead of the meeting dates, actually. There's no financial impact with this, Mr. Chairman, and the last page, or the third page of the actual attachment, I think shows quite nicely in color codes when the proposed council meetings are scheduled, as well as a few other of those kind of special events that make those first 3 months in particular more challenging to set a second meeting. So with that, I would turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry.
You're welcome.
Any questions from council? Glenn?
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of struggle with the fact that March, why we only have one, especially for the third week, is not the RMA convention. And February for that matter too, because January we only have one because we're off for quite a while, so I understand that one, but I don't understand the other two.
If I may, to Councillor Hickey, I'm sorry, so you're looking, Councillor Hickey, at the month of March, and what was the second one, pardon me? February as well. So, in the month of February, I can see there as well, you're right, February 16th, it doesn't appear in advance that there are any major events that council might typically attend. For the month of March, it looks to me the same again, the 16th, it's the week before that, so...
Candace just had
Yeah,
something, I think.
maybe we've got something more, sorry.
I was just going to say that we just don't have the emerging trends dates yet, but they've indicated that it will most likely be held the third week in February. But I just
Okay.
don't have that for the dates.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Larry.
No, that's fine. Just those points, and that's a good thing to know. So, I mean, Councillor Hickey, absolutely, at council's discretion and will, you could, put those dates on this schedule, and then if needed, cancel those or postpone those meetings or change them otherwise. We're only required to give 24 hours notice of a regularly scheduled meeting change. So there's lots of wiggle room there. So to your points, again, as council sees appropriate.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my concerns with it is what is our obligation as to hold meetings in a timely manner for those who want to get subdivisions or anything that needs to come before council. Even if we're not mandated to, it's even a thing that it might be a good idea, even if they're short meetings. So could you talk on what we're mandated to do?
Sure, I'll attempt to. Thank you for the question, Councillor Van Essen. I know when it comes to subdivisions, if I'm not mistaken, and of course Hillary would have this up and down, back and forth, every which way in her mind, but I believe we have 40 days to render a decision from the time an application is submitted. So even in a month where there are fewer than 2 meetings, 1 meeting only scheduled, normally we can accommodate that and meet that deadline. There are a few other mandated response issues with respect to planning, but I think that's the big one and certainly the most common one. But we're within that time frame. We can work with that. Again, if for some reason someone submitted an application and we were approaching that 40-day deadline, I think that the logical remedy would be to schedule a special meeting to address it. We haven't had to do that I recall in the past few years at least. And there may be some other mandated, with finance things, but again, I think with even just one meeting per month, we've been able to work around that. And I know with our involvement with the Old Man River Regional Services Commission and the work they do for us with respect to preparing subdivision applications and processing them, they're aware of this schedule and they kind of work with that. And so if they receive an application or an inquiry, for example, in early February about, well, I'm going to apply for my subdivision now, when can I expect an answer? They are aware of this, and they'll not set someone up for false expectations, knowing that, well, this time it might be 2 weeks longer than it might otherwise be, just because of the way the council meeting schedule falls. So it is, broadly speaking, accommodated.
Anything further from council? Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
How would you like to proceed? There is a, excuse me, there is a recommendation before us.
Well, just like one more comment, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yeah, to cut down on these few months down there in the council meetings, I don't 100% agree with that, because I think when we do have the regular council meetings down there, even if it is not going to be a big agenda or anything, but we do stay more informed. That's the way you kind of look at it. And as I think it's been kind of going the other way in the last few years, and I still would like to see the regular meetings being continued.
Any other thoughts from council? I guess I personally don't have a problem with the recommendation. I think if we can have missing 2 meetings, I think on my time on council anyways, I think we've been able to meet the demands that, as Larry suggested, any timelines that we've had. Thinking bigger picture, I just think that is a very hectic time of the year for everyone, and seeing as this isn't, I know, speaking personally, this isn't my number one job, and I do have other priorities. I do appreciate being able to schedule things in those months. If anything, I would like to see us go to one in September would be my preference. But I don't have a problem with the recommendation as it stands personally. Any other comments? Feedback? John?
In terms of the January, I understand. The February and March, I would like to see that we have 2 in there. And then the July and August, it's the summertime, so that's a busy time for just about everybody. I think it would, we can always, if something conflicts, move it, change it, and choose to either postpone it or not have it at all at that point in time. But to have a regular scheduled for February and March, I think would be important.
Okay. I'm sensing a consensus. Would someone like to? John?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the County Council approve the 2023 council meeting schedule with 1 council meeting each for the months of January, July, and August, and further that these dates be advertised in the Sunny South News, county's website, social media pages.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? So John has moved an amended version of the recommendation to read that County Council approves the 2023 council meeting schedule with 1 council meeting each for the months of January, July, and August, and further that these dates be advertised in the Sunny South News, county's website, and social media pages. Any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving down, Larry, H3.2, the 2023 FCM Annual Conference and Trade Show.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FCM Annual, and I'll spell that out for anyone maybe watching who's unfamiliar with that. It's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Annual Conference and Trade Show. Is scheduled to be held in Toronto, May 25th to 28th, 2023. Almost 8 months away. We're way out in front here. And administration is, of course, for arrangement purposes and so on, seeking to find out which council members may wish to attend and be authorized to attend by the majority of council. So our recommendation today is that the members of council wishing to attend the FCM 2023 Annual Conference and Trade Show, scheduled for May 25th to 28th, 2023 in Toronto, be authorized to do so. Just the history here a little bit. The county is a member of the FCM and has been for a long, long time. I'm sure maybe one or two of the councillors been here much longer than I would know, but as far as I know, it's been, again, a very long time. And the county has sent people to this conference regularly in the past. Just looking here, there is a little chart, or a little table there from 2016 to 2022 showing that on any given year between 2 and 4 council members have attended, 2020 being the exception, I think because of COVID, where the conference was actually canceled. Details of this year's conference are still forthcoming. Again, so far out in front, I'm sure they don't have all the details worked out, but I think it is an important conference, and it allows the county to network and present county concerns and issues to various ministers and other delegates and conference officials who are attending there. For council to attend this conference, the primary costs are conference registration fees, flights, and hotels. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Welcome.
Any discussion from council? Any questions? How would you like to proceed? John?
I would like to move that, yeah, I guess this is worded well, that the members of the county council wishing to attend the FCM 2023 annual conference and trade show scheduled for May 25th to 28th, 2023 in Toronto be authorized to do so.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, John has moved the recommendation that the members of council wishing to attend the FCM 2023 annual conference and trade show scheduled for May 25th to 28th, 2023 in Toronto be authorized to do so. Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. I'll just stop on the correspondence quickly, Larry, and then we'll move to the addition, if that's all right.
Certainly.
If we move down to correspondence, we had one item of correspondence, and that was a thank you card from the CEO at Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Mike just reached out to Anne to thank for the county's participation in the pancake breakfast and the parade, and to show his appreciation for getting to know council. So Mike will be coming back to us again here in the near future for another presentation, so appreciative of that of that relationship, sorry. And then we can move down now. We had added an additional item under new business, I-1, rural crime discussion. And I guess I can start that. I'm not sure, I know several members of council received some calls this week regarding rural crime, especially in the area south and east of the city. Been a number of incidents as of late, and a number of the residents of that area reached out to, I know for sure, Lauren, Mark, myself, I'm not sure if anyone else on council, but to share their concerns and just, I think, frustrations over the perceived level of crime in the area, lack of police presence, and I guess lack of results that they feel they're getting from the RCMP. So I thought this might be an opportunity to at least have that discussion. My thought is that at the minimum we could have administration draft a letter to the RCMP to bring these concerns forward, and also obviously emphasize again the importance of reporting those crimes. In speaking to a resident, they felt that even though they were reporting, they weren't getting anything out of that. So I would just like to open the floor up, and if anyone has anything to add or anything else on that, I just wanted to have this discussion in the public meeting. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess when the gentleman phoned me the other day, I was a little concerned about two things he said, and the one especially was the standoff that his neighbor had when he had his gun out and kept the people at bay till the police arrived. I think that letter to the RCMP kind of informing them they need to keep a little better patrol on the county would be certainly well advised, and I hate to see vigilante tactics like that go on. I mean, I know everybody gets upset because their property is being disappearing and vandalized, and it's just not something that I think we want to promote.
Thank you, Lauren. Mark?
The other thing I was gonna suggest is in that letter, just with the RCMP, is to suggest they, do patrols at different times of day or in the evening. I guess that's the part, that was the comment that the gentleman made to me, that was that it's just if there's a police presence out there, that might deter some of it. I know in our neighborhood, we haven't had any big hits lately, but there's been people driving around. There was a gang or a group that was coming in southern Alberta, they were from the old area, and they cruised through our neighbor's yard, and we've got a security camera, so it's out there. We've been fortunate enough in our area. I wasn't aware this was happening down there. The fella that, we had a fella deliver a load of wood to us that night after we went home, we loaded his truck carrier got stolen with the wood in it. So I got my wood, but anyway, but it was, that's pretty bad. They live right on the road, so they're on the pavement there, so it's a bad, but I'm glad that, the Pat told me, I had no idea that this was going on down that part of the number of incidents. So it's, and I said to him, you need to report to the police whether you think it matters or not. They need to, they target this, they put it into their modeling system, and then they can dedicate resources based on the amount of concerns they have. So it's not being wasted. You need to get it. But yeah, it's the vigilante thing. It's scary. There's some fellow down there who got lost in a grenade in the golf course and just got pulled out of his vehicle and they were ready to get out and realize what was really happening. So I think they need to, I'm not really sure to deal with that. I'm sure the RCP is fully aware of it, but it just doesn't hurt for us to just pass that on.
Thank you, Mark. Anything further? Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that we should probably, seeing that it's going up a little bit again, that we just mention that to the K Division when we meet with them in the RMA.
Absolutely. Anything further? Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may just say as well that you recall, I think it was the first meeting in September, the RCMP came in person to kind of give an update. And at that point, they reiterated the importance of people reporting crimes, even if, ultimately there's no resolve to them, but so that they know and, they can allocate appropriate resources and so on. As well, at that time, we were asked to repost and republish the fact that the RCMP app is available, and it shows trends in crime and a number of other things, with a nifty little map for people's iPhones. That's something else people can do to kind of just overall help in the grand scheme of things. And one other note, if I may make, is that Lethbridge County has one community peace officer, but that peace officer is not authorized to enforce the Criminal Code of Canada. If he is driving somewhere and he sees, three hooded figures exiting a window on a house or something, he's not armed, he's not, technically trained, he's not equipped, it's not his role to attempt to apprehend those people in the act. He can do like everyone else can, and that's call 911 for the RCMP. And I just think sometimes there's maybe a little bit of a misconception or misunderstanding about what the peace officer's role is in Lethbridge County. Traffic issues for sure. He's well authorized and does lots of that, traffic enforcement under the Traffic Safety Act, and then of course Lethbridge County bylaws and so on. But again, for crimes and criminal activity, that's just not his role. Simple as that. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
You're welcome.
Anything further? How would you like to proceed? Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move that we direct staff to send a letter to the RCMP in Coaldale stating what we have heard here, and seeing if they could do more patrolling in the area, and especially in the evenings.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved to direct administration to draft a letter under the Reeve signature to the RCMP, informing them of our discussions here today, and to encourage increased patrols in the county, especially in this area that we discussed today, and evening patrols as well. Thank you. Anything further? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. John? May I have a word for a moment? I just wanted to acknowledge that our next council meeting will be our organizational meeting. So I just wanted to, knowing that obviously situations can be fluid, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for the last year. Thank you for the opportunity to sit in this chair. I don't take it lightly. It's been a steep learning curve, but I have enjoyed it. And I just want to say a special thank you to our executive assistant, Candace Robinson, for everything she does for Reven Council. It's greatly appreciated, as well as CAO Ann Mitchell. I think we're fortunate to have a really good team here at Lethbridge County, and it's been a pleasure serving in this role. So thank you. And maybe on top of that too, just on behalf of all of council, just knowing I think people underestimate maybe the magnitude of what goes into these roles, and the time commitment and the commitment that we spend in the community. So I just want to extend on behalf of council just to thank you to everyone that supports us, family, friends, co-workers, those people that are our support networks at home that allow us the time and the flexibility to be here. I know I have a lot of people in my corner. So thank you for that. And with that, John? Motion to adjourn. Everybody in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.